This is Land of Havilah and the beginning of the book of 2 Kings. Just a little housekeeping. We're still reading from the World English Bible, which has no copyright, otherwise we couldn't legally read or post this much text. The World English Bible uses the term Yahweh in the Old Testament instead of Lord. There's an explanation of that in the Land of Havilah Genesis chapter 2 episode. Also in Genesis chapter 2, there's an explanation of the Land of Havilah. It's a place that has all the good stuff, so that's what we call this project, Land of Havilah. We want to put all the good stuff in it, not that we could ever come close to all of it. Comments on the Hebrew language are based mostly on the NET Bible translation notes. So we pray now that God the Father would show us all the good stuff as we begin 2 Kings, which is really just a continuation of 1 Kings. We're still reading every verse and commenting just a little to give the understanding. In the last chapter, Ahab died from a random arrow at Ramoth-Gilead. His son Ahaziah is on the throne. Now 2 Kings chapter 1, verse 1. Moab rebelled against Israel after the death of Ahab. Comment: Moab's the country on the opposite side of the Dead Sea. We knew that King David subjected Moab about 150 years before 2 Samuel 8:2, but we haven't heard anything about Moab since then. But now, according to verse 1, Ahab had them in subjection, and now they've rebelled. Yahweh cursed the house of Ahab like the houses of Baasha and Jeroboam before. All of Ahab's male offspring, plus his wife Jezebel, will die violent deaths, according to Yahweh. Furthermore, his descendants won't be able to hold the throne. As for Ahab's son Ahaziah, who's on the throne now, verse 2, Ahaziah fell down through the lattice in his upper room that was in Samaria and was sick. Comment: there was no glass at the time. Windows were openings which could be covered by shutters or latticework, Judges 5:28, 1 Kings 6:4, and other places. So Ahaziah fell through a window and injured himself to the point of being sick. It was an upper room in verse 1, so he fell at least one story. It sounds like he had internal injuries. He's confined to the bed, as we learn later. Still in verse 2. So he sent messengers and said to them, Go inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, whether I will recover of this sickness. Comment: Ahaziah wants to consult with Beelzebub, the god of Ekron. Ekron's one of the 5 major cities of the Philistines, 1 Samuel 6:18. Baal means Lord, so this is simply one of the multiple gods of the area, one that's particularly associated with the city of Ekron. Probably the Ekronites built him a temple. Ahaziah says, Go check with Beelzebub to see if I'll recover, probably meaning at his temple with some of his priests. This is obviously a far cry from what a king of Israel should be doing. Coming up, Yahweh's going to intervene through Elijah, verse 3. But Yahweh's angel said to Elijah the Tishbite, Arise, go up to meet the messengers of the king of Samaria, and tell them, Is it because there is no God in Israel that you go to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Now therefore, Yahweh says, You will not come down from the bed where you have gone up, but you will surely die. Then Elijah departed. The messengers returned to him, and he said to them, Why is it that you have returned? They said to him, A man came up to meet us and said to us, Go return to the king who sent you, and tell him, Yahweh says, Is it because there is no God in Israel that you send to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore you will not come down from the bed where you have gone up, but you will surely die. He said to them, What kind of man was he who came up to meet you and told you these words? They answered him, He was a hairy man and wearing a leather belt around his waist. He said, It's Elijah the Tishbite. Then the king sent a captain of 50 with his 50 to him. He went up to him, and behold, he was sitting on top of the hill. He said to him, Man of God, the king has said, Come down. Comment: Ahaziah dispatched a captain with 50 men to bring Elijah to the palace. They found Elijah on top of a hill. He's not in a cave like many of his fellow prophets, 1 Kings 18:13. Yahweh has inspired Elijah to expose himself at this time. But they're not giving Elijah any respect. In the first place, Ahaziah disrespected Elijah by sending a military force. Military coercion isn't the way you deal with a prophet. It's insulting to the prophet and to God, as if 50 men could compete with the power of God's protection. It's not that Elijah cares what the king or captain think of him. It's that Yahweh has been insulted by the sending of the military, and with this insolent command, quote, "The king has said, come down." Since Yahweh has been insulted, Elijah responds in the following manner. Verse 10, Elijah answered to the captain of 50, "If I am a man of God, then let fire come down from the sky and consume you and your 50. Then fire came down from the sky and consumed him and his 50. Comment: Elijah means Yahweh is God. So if we were hearing it in the Hebrew, we would hear the captain call out, "Yahweh is God, come down." Deuteronomy 4:24, quote, "Yahweh your God is a consuming fire," end quote. So this was a case of the captain getting exactly what he asked. When he said, "Yahweh is God, come down," the fire of Deuteronomy 4:24 came down. Obviously the 51 didn't return to Ahaziah. Meanwhile, back on the sickbed, Ahaziah either got tired of waiting on his captain to come back, or word somehow got back to him what happened. So verse 11, "Again he sent to him another captain of 50 with his 50. He answered him, 'Man of God, the king has said, come down quickly.' Elijah answered them, 'If I am a man of God, then let fire come down from the sky and consume you and your 50. Then God's fire came down from the sky and consumed him and his 50. Comment: 102 men are dead so far, 2 captains and 2 groups of 50. Ahaziah didn't learn his lesson, so verse 13. Again he sent the captain of a third 50 with his 50. The third captain of 50 went up and came and fell on his knees before Elijah and begged him and said to him, 'Man of God, please let my life and the life of these 50 of your servants be precious in your sight.' Comment: the captain says, verse 14, 'Behold, fire came down from the sky and consumed the last 2 captains of 50 with their 50s. But now let my life be precious in your sight.' Yahweh's angel said to Elijah, 'Go down with him, don't be afraid of him.' Then he arose and went down with him to the king." Comment: Elijah finally got a command from Yahweh to go down, so he went down. Jesus said you can't serve 2 masters, Matthew 6:24. That's why Elijah refused orders from Ahaziah. Ahaziah wasn't his master. This seems to be in conflict with Romans 13:1, quote, "Let every soul be in subjection to the higher authorities," end quote, meaning we should be subject to rulers and governmental authorities, Romans 13:3 and 4. However, there might come times when we can't comply with the ruling authorities. For example, the Jewish council commanded Peter and the apostles not to preach the gospel. Peter replied, "We must obey God rather than men," Acts 5:29. So to comply or not to comply is the question, and the answer is to comply when God allows us and not to comply when God has given us other marching orders. This is why totalitarian governments persecute and kill Christians. It's because when it comes down to certain commands, Christians don't necessarily comply. However, at times, persecution might boil down to a simpler explanation. Jesus said, quote, "The world hates me because I testify that its works are evil," John 7:7. So persecution might not have anything to do with defying a command. If a Christian simply testifies that the government's works are evil, that can certainly be enough to send the government into a fit of rage. But on the 3rd time, the angel of Yahweh commanded Elijah to cooperate, so he came down, and certainly the captain's treating him with fear and respect now. And in the coming verse, Elijah will address the king in the name of Yahweh. Verse 16, "He said to him, Yahweh says, because you have sent messengers to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, is it because there is no God in Israel to inquire of his word? Therefore you will not come down from the bed where you have gone up, but you will surely die." So he died according to Yahweh's word which Elijah had spoken. Comment: Ahaziah died because he failed to recognize there is a God in Israel. He died of his injuries after being on the throne only 2 years, as it said at the end of the last chapter. This is the curse taking effect on Ahab's house, with more deaths to come and the loss of the throne. Still in verse 17. Jehoram began to reign in his place in the 2nd year of Jehoram the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, because he had no son. Comment: 2 Kings chapter 8 provides clarifying information. There are 2 Jehorams on their thrones now, one in Judah and one in Israel. To add to the confusion, the text uses either Jehoram or Joram for each of them. Ahaziah, who fell out of the window, had no son, therefore his brother Jehoram took the throne. Ahaziah and Jehoram were both sons of Ahab. Verse 18. Now the rest of the acts of Ahaziah which he did, aren't they written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? Comment: There's no eulogy for the king who consulted Beelzebub, disrespected Elijah, and failed to acknowledge the God of Israel. Yahweh has described other gods as being, quote, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, hear, eat, nor smell. Deuteronomy 4:28. Of course, the Israelites should have known from Genesis 1:1 that God wasn't just the God of Israel. He created the heavens and the earth and was God of all. If you or I are sick or well, we shouldn't fail to acknowledge that. We don't want to stir up wrath like Ahaziah, so let's not ignore God in our troubles. As a side note, back in verse 8, Ahaziah sent messengers to Ekron, and they came back saying that they had seen Elijah. They described him as a hairy man with a leather belt. The New Testament says that John the Baptist wore a garment made of camel's hair and a leather belt, Matthew 3:4. So this fueled the speculation that John the Baptist was Elijah returned to the earth, and Jesus seemed to confirm that somewhat when he said, quote, if you are willing to receive it, this is Elijah who is to come, Matthew 11:13. Also, as a side note, Beelzebub means Lord of the Flies. According to archaeology, there was an Amorite god named Beelzebul, meaning Lord of Princes. So it seemed the word of Yahweh changed his name by one letter in mockery to make him Beelzebub rather than Beelzebul, Lord of the Flies rather than Lord of Princes. 2 Kings 2 is next at landofhavilah.net. This is the map of 2 Kings chapter 1. Ahaziah fell out of his upper room window in Samaria. He sent messengers to Ekron to inquire of Beelzebub. Jehoram was king in Jerusalem when another Jehoram, the brother of Ahaziah, took the throne in Israel. 2 Kings 2 is next.